Well, out on the frontier, a deer meant meat and it meant skins for trade. Overall, it meant survival. Today on the Deerskin Diary, we're going to take a look at a 1700 style deer hunt, at least the way that I do it. And you're going to get a glimpse of that hunt through my perspective. So stick around. This is a topic that's very dear to me, and hopefully I'm going to get a good shot at it. The hunting of the white-tailed deer isn't just a popular pastime today. Back in the 18th century, it was a vital part of life for people living out and along the frontier. And that deer didn't just feed the cabin. The skins were also used for trade, and the deerskin trade will be a topic for future videos. But today, we're simply going to focus on the hunt. Now, I've hunted most of my adult life. And over the years, I've accumulated all kinds of really expensive equipment, everything from insulating layers to rain gear to hand warmers to scents and rifles and suppressors and optics and binoculars. But I also began to feel disconnected from the woods that I love so much, and it was my love of history and my love of the woods that combined to give me the idea, could I take all of that modern stuff away? Could I just give myself the tools and technology that my predecessors had, and could I still make it happen? Was I good enough? Was I patient enough? Did I understand woodsmanship enough? Now, spoiler alert, it hasn't always been easy, and I'm certainly not always successful. I'm certainly not always as patient as I should be. And I do still hunt with the modern equipment as well, as my family does supplement our diet with the deer that I harvest. Now, in terms of clothing, it's obviously very weather dependent. Today, the high is in the mid 40s or so. The lows were in the low 30s to upper 20s. So I need to stay a little bit warmer. So I've got a few extra layers on. I've got my linen hunting shirt that's on over a woolen jacket, that's on over a wool waistcoat, which is basically a vest, which is on over a linen shirt. On my legs, I have wool breeches that go down to about the knees, and I have buckskin leggings from the ankle to the knees that tie up to a belt on my waist to protect my lower legs. Underneath the leggings, I have a pair of wool socks, and over the wool socks, I have a pair of harder-soled leather moccasins. And on my head, I have this nice fancy orange-ish woolen knit cap. And that's it for clothing. I have a pair of mitts I can put on my hands. They don't have fancy trigger fingers or anything like that, so I've got to take them off before I can function a firearm or something like that, but they do keep my hands warm, and certainly warmer than nothing. Now, a quick note about safety here. I am actually deer hunting today, though I'm on private property. My state still requires 500 square inches of blaze orange. And while I am a stickler for authenticity, I'm also a stickler for my own personal safety. And I don't want to do anything that's going to jeopardize my quality of life or change this from a hobby to something else. So you're going to see some things that are in my kit today that wouldn't normally be there. Now I'm going to start with the safety equipment here, and I've got a bright orange wool hat, an orange neckerchief, and this bright orange cape that you've seen me wear. That is way more than the 500 square inches that's required. Moving into the required hunting gear, I've got my bison horn, I've got my shot pouch, and there's a video I have about what I carry in that shot pouch. And I've got my 54 caliber rifle here. This is a Jim Kibler kit. This is a 54 caliber Colonial. I shoot a 5.30 ball with about 60 grains of powder and a thin muslin patch. For inclement weather, I have this thing here called a cow's knee. It goes over the lock and protects it from moisture and ties around the base of the stock and around the forestock. Now, I've got my tomahawk here. This is very useful for cutting brush for blinds, and I've got my belt knife here. This is useful obviously for cleaning, gutting and skinning any game animals. I've also got a small pocket knife in my pocket. In terms of insulating layers, I have this heavy woolen, it's a wool lined greatcoat that's excellent for cold mornings like this morning. It was down in the low 30s. And I can put that over my regular clothing and then put the cape over the top of that, and it keeps me absolutely warm. Now in terms of support equipment, I've got my canteen here, my wooden canteen filled with water. I've got my blanket along with a ground cloth here. I like to have a blanket with me when it's super cold outside. Now, I also carry a knapsack, but I don't carry a whole lot in it when I'm hunting. I just try to keep the bare necessities. I've got a spare pair of moccasins here. I've got a moccasin repair kit, and that actually came in handy today because I had to fix the moccasins that I'm wearing when the sole started to come off. I have a small pocket compass. There are two general rules to life. One is always know where you are, and two is if you don't know where you are, at least try to look cool, and that compass helps me with both of those. I've got a fire kit with plenty of dry tinder. As a matter of fact, when I was hunting this morning, I gathered up some tinder along the way and put that in my hat and then eventually put it in that bag. And I have this bag that has a sewing kit and some other things just for general support. And last but not least, I've got this extra tump line. And this tump line is very useful for dragging deer out of the woods. It's very useful for hanging deer up when you go to gut or skin them. And it's just overall, to me, very useful and better than just regular rope. And that's it for the equipment that I carry with me in terms of support. It's not that much different than what I carry in my modern hunting equipment. I have a firearm. I have something to stay warm with. Sometimes they're little hand warmers. Sometimes little hand muffs that I can stick my hand into. I've got maybe an extra hat in there, maybe an extra dry pair of socks sometimes. And that's about it, besides one major thing that I don't have in my 18th century kit, which is a flashlight. Now, most long hunters didn't sit in blinds all day, and they certainly didn't hunt out of tree stands like we know today. And the sheer plentifulness of game probably meant that they could get away with a lot of things that we can't get away with today. Certainly the lack of game laws and the lack of property boundaries gave them far more options than we have today. One of the 18th century techniques that I like to use the most, mostly because it's the most legal of them still, is the still hunting technique. And that's where I move for a little bit, kind of take in everything that's around me, observe for a while, and then move a little bit longer. And eventually I try to wind up at a place where I know is going to maximize my chances of seeing game. And a lot of times that's going to be where a game trail crosses a larger trail or an open area or something like that, where that game animal has to reveal itself and possibly give me a shot. With primitive hunting, so many factors have to come together at once. For me, I have to have the time to hunt. I have to be in the right spot. The animal has to present itself, and it has to be the correct animal for state game laws or rules. And it's got to be within the range of my muzzle loader. And so there are so many variables that I don't control that have to come together. But I enjoy it so much because it connects me back to the woods. There's a lot to be said for the modern technology where I could climb a tree, for example, and be out of the scent cone. And I certainly hunt that way from time to time as well. But hunting this way, though I'm largely unsuccessful at it, far more that I am successful is still a way for me to connect not just with the woods, but with my predecessors. And just like hunting throughout time, staying downwind can be the difference between success and failure. Now, I use small feathers or pieces of grass to read the wind when it's appropriate. Nathan Boone was one of Daniel Boone's sons, and in the 1840s, he sat down with noted frontier historian Lyman Draper, where he described some of his father's deer hunting tactics. My father would sometimes hunt all day for deer. He would not just watch salt licks. He would start early in the morning when the leaves were moistened with dew and thus caused no noise when walking, and deer generally were feeding. They're always on their feet, feeding or walking about during the rising of the moon, to which hunters pay great respect. Deer are easier seen when on their feet and moving about than when they are lying down, and though there were particular hours in the day when they mostly fed, the hunters would keep hunting all day. 19th century naturalist John James Audubon said that, quote, "We have 3 modes of hunting deer, each varying in some slight degree in the different states and districts. The first is termed still hunting and is by far the most destructive." The other 2 methods that Audubon refers to are fire hunting and deer drives, both of which are confirmed by Nathan Boone and one of my favorites, Mesach Browning, who was considered the Daniel Boone of Maryland. And if you're the spouse of a hunter who feels alone in the fall and winter, you're historically accurate. Joseph Doddridge described the same phenomenon in the 1700s. They became uneasy at home. Everything about them became disagreeable. The house was too warm, the feather bed too soft, and even the good wife was not thought for the time being a proper companion. The mind of the hunter was wholly occupied with the camp and chase. Well, day 2 started off fairly exciting. Saw 4 deer total, 2 presented with the shot. As you can see from the footage, presenting with the shot and getting the shot are 2 different things. The nearest I can figure is that the powder charge that I put in the pan this morning, as I was walking in, I guess the condensation or something got to it. And so, you work really, really hard and everything falls into place and your equipment can still fail you at the worst possible time. But in everything there is a lesson. And in this one, it is that when I sit down, put in a fresh powder charge into the pan. So, all right, now I'm a little bit smarter. But the lesson I continually learn with primitive weapons hunting is that it's not about going out and seeing game. That's the relatively easy part of this whole process. It's about getting close enough to be able to legally and ethically harvest that game with the weapon that you have. And that usually means limited velocity, limited range, so you've got to get up closer. A lot of times it takes a little bit more to make the weapon system go off, whether that's a bow and arrow or a flintlock muzzleloader. And so where the skill set really comes into play to me is the sort of flash to bang, if you will, between seeing the game and harvesting the game. And that is an elusive skill for me, even after several years of doing this. And on some days you don't get anything, and that's real frontier hunting. Food wasn't always guaranteed, and nature always gets a vote. And sometimes my failures are a better teacher to me than my successes. Not being successful on a hunt has always reminded me of how important it is for our vast access to food nowadays. If we all had to live like this, it's likely that malnutrition and starvation would be far more rampant. And that's something to think about the next time you buy your groceries at one of the big box stores. And that is an 18th century deer hunt full of boredom and excitement, but most of all meaning, not just to me, but also the meaning that I know that it was to our 18th century predecessors. Now, if you like seeing history brought back to life, not just reading about it in books, hit that like and subscribe button because I've got a lot more content coming your way. And I'll see you next time on the Deerskin Diary.